guys, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to ASMR. Let's find a quiet spot, get your headphones in, and together we'll dive into a world of whispers and chills. It started the day I came back from the hospital. I'd been in there for 3 weeks after a cycling accident, concussion, fractured wrist, bruised ribs. Nothing too serious, but the doctors wanted to monitor some irregularities with my short-term memory. I didn't remember the fall, just the moments before, then waking up in a white room with my brother sitting stiffly in a chair. I live alone, no pets, no partner. I keep to myself, and I like it that way. So when I opened the door to my flat, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Not musty or stale, but lived in, like someone had been there. Dishes in the drying rack, shower still damp, books moved on the shelf, subtle, but not how I left them. I even checked the fridge. There were things in it I don't buy, a brand of orange juice I hate, leftovers I didn't recognise, 2 empty beer bottles in the bin. I haven't had a drink in almost a year. At first, I thought maybe my brother had been staying over to water the plants or keep the place clean. But when I called him, he sounded surprised. Told me he hadn't stepped foot inside since I was admitted. That night, I found one of my sweaters balled up under the bed, one I hadn't worn since last winter. It smelled like someone else, faintly, not cologne or detergent, more like skin, warm, oily, not mine. I started noticing changes, tiny ones. The coffee jar was lower than it should have been, the water in the kettle warm in the mornings, my razor wet. I thought maybe I was still off from my head injury, gaps in memory, confused routines. But then I found the photo. It was tucked into a notebook I hadn't used in months. A photo of me, at least it looked like me, standing in my kitchen, wearing my hoodie, but the expression was wrong, blank, heavy-lidded, like it was trying to remember how to be a person. The photo wasn't printed on photo paper, it was printed on receipt stock, like it had come from a self-serve kiosk somewhere. I didn't take it, and there were more. Over the next few days, I started finding them in strange places, behind cupboard doors, in coat pockets, under the bathroom sink. Each one closer, each one more detailed. None of them I remembered posing for. I changed the locks, installed a camera inside the living room, one of those cloud-based ones that backs up automatically. The first 2 nights, nothing. Then on the third, I checked the footage at 2 AM out of habit, and there he was, in my flat, walking like me, standing the way I do, but off, too stiff, too still. He sat on the couch and just stared forward for almost an hour. Then, without warning, turned and looked directly into the camera. Not like he noticed it, more like he knew where it was the whole time. I froze, I couldn't breathe. Then the screen glitched just once, and the timestamp changed, jumped forward 3 minutes. When it resumed, the room was empty, and the footage for those 3 minutes, gone, corrupted. I tried downloading the backup, corrupted too. The next morning, I woke up with a faint cut across my cheek, small, straight, like a paper cut, except it stung like a burn, and when I went to splash water on my face, I noticed something worse. The mirror showed a smudge on my shoulder, right above the collarbone. When I turned to check it in the bathroom light, there was nothing there, but in the mirror, still visible, like a faint thumbprint pressing through from the other side. I started hearing the sound of me moving around the flat, not footsteps, just a shuffle of clothes, a cough, breathing that wasn't mine. When I walked from room to room, I'd catch glimpses in the corner of my vision, just enough to make me stop. Nothing ever It's the kind I drink, but I hadn't made it. I poured it down the drain without touching it, then went back to my room and locked the door. The locks don't help though, because the next morning I woke up on the couch. No memory of getting there. Blanket tucked around my legs. TV on, paused on a frame of static. I checked the camera app again. New footage, this time just 30 seconds. It shows me sleeping on the couch. Then, from the hallway, the second me walks into frame, stares at me, then kneels beside the couch, reaches up and presses his hand against my face. Everything flickers and the video ends. I don't know if it's some sort of psychosis, a neurological artifact from the head injury, a doppelganger, a haunting. I don't care, because he's not trying to hurt me. He's trying to replace me, and I think he's nearly done. I'm forgetting things now, conversations, old friends. My own handwriting looks unfamiliar. Sometimes I wake up and my voice sounds slightly off when I speak, or I catch myself doing something, like stirring my coffee the wrong way, or walking with a limp I never had. A stranger at the grocery store smiled at me yesterday and said, "I thought you moved already." I've never seen her before, but she looked at me like she knew me, or like she used to. There's one last photo. I found it in the mailbox this morning. No stamp, and it shows me, standing outside my own flat, key in hand, but the lights inside are already on, and someone who looks like me, is looking back through the window, smiling. I used to be a land surveyor for the Bureau of Land Management, mostly Arizona, Nevada, and the edge of Utah. The work sounds more adventurous than it is. Mostly it's just walking grids, checking terrain changes, updating records no one reads. Sometimes you end up where nobody should be. One of those places was Sand Hollow. Not the town, the actual stretch of desert a few miles beyond the state park. Rough, broken land with weird rock formations and salt-crusted patches where water used to be. It was 2016 when I was assigned to do a recon survey for a proposed communication line. 2-week solo grid mapping, 30 square miles. I was given a company truck, a GPS kit, radio and a satellite phone. I was also warned, unofficially, not to work past dusk out there. No explanation, just, sun goes down, you get moving. Didn't ask questions, didn't want answers. The first few days were uneventful, just wind and lizards and red sand in everything I owned. But on day 4, I noticed something strange about a quarter mile off my grid line. A structure. Wasn't on any map. Looked like concrete cube half buried in sand. No windows, one door, no markings. Could have been an old utility vault, but the exterior was clean, too clean. No rust, no weathering. I logged it, snapped a photo, and marked the location. That night, back at my camp, I checked the satellite image. The spot was just blank. Not even topographic data, like it had been edited out. I tried calling in on the sat phone, no signal. First time that had happened all trip. The next morning, I went back. This time, the door was open. Not wide, just cracked. It was dark, no obvious lights or furniture, just flat concrete walls. And on the far wall, about shoulder height, there were scratches, deep, erratic lines, like something had crawled at the wall overnight. I leaned in with my flashlight. The marks weren't new. Whatever made them had done it long ago. The concrete was worn down at the edges, like fingernails dragging through it repeatedly. I took one photo. As I turned to leave, I heard something move behind the wall. Not loudly, just a subtle scrape of motion, like a body sliding along rough stone. I didn't stick around to see more. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about that noise. Not what what it sounded like, but how close it was, right behind where I'd been standing. The next day, I made myself stay away from the structure. I went back to the grid work, but around 3 p.m. I saw footprints, human ones, not mine. The pattern was different, wider stride, heavier gait, and they weren't coming from anywhere, no trail behind them, just a straight line toward my camp. When I got back, nothing looked touched, except the cooler was open, and my second pair of boots were gone, the ones I kept zipped in a bag. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a hiker messing around, but the prints weren't scuffed or broken, they were clear, deliberate. I packed everything and slept in the truck that night, doors locked, gear stowed. At 2:42 a.m, the motion alarm I'd set outside triggered. I sat up, turned on the floodlight, nothing. Just empty desert and a long, quiet wind. But the sand by the driver's side door had been brushed clean, like someone had swept it with their hand. The next morning, I drove straight toward the highway. Didn't finish the survey, didn't report the structure, but a week later, I got a USB in the mail. Unmarked, no return address. When I plugged it into a clean laptop, there was only one folder, and it contained 6 photos, all of them of me, sleeping, in the tent, in the truck, in the field, back turned, all at night, all clearly taken inches from where I was. And in the bottom corner of the last photo, barely in frame, something is crouched, facing away, naked, thin, its spine sharp and arched like a mantis. Its skin looked dry, sunburned, but there was no hair, no features I could make out, no eyes, just a slight turn of the head, like it knew the photo was being taken. This happened 2 summers ago. I was driving home from visiting my brother in Wisconsin, a long, boring stretch of state highway surrounded by flat fields and broken fences. The sun was setting, and I'd been on the road for hours. No music, no service, just the hum of tyres on asphalt. I was maybe 4 hours from home when the gas light came on. There was nothing around except empty road signs and long shadows, but about 10 minutes later, I saw one, a run-down gas station on the side of the road. No other buildings, no cars, just a flickering overhead light and one old metal pump. I almost drove past it. It didn't look open, but the pump still had power, and I wasn't in a position to be picking. I pulled in, left the car running, and got out. The air was hot and dead still, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I slid my card through the pump. It didn't work. Tried again. Nothing. Then the door to the little building opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall but slouched, maybe late 50s, pale skin, no expression, hands tucked deep into the pockets of his overalls. He didn't say anything, just stood there. I gave a nervous wave and asked, "Pump not working?" He nodded once. "Cash only." His voice was hoarse, like someone who hadn't used it in a while. I hesitated. I almost never carry cash, but I remembered I had $20 stuffed in my glove box from a takeout order I'd cancelled the week before. I told him I'd grab it and headed back to the car. When I turned around again, he was gone. Door shut, lights inside off. I stared at the building. There hadn't been a bell, no footsteps. He'd just vanished. I stood there a moment, debating whether I should just drive to the next town, but the gas gauge was now deep in the red, so I knocked on the station door. No answer. The windows were too dirty to see in clearly, but I pressed my face to the glass. What I saw didn't make sense. Inside wasn't a convenience store. There was no shelves, no fridge, no counter. Just one chair in the middle of a dark, empty room, facing the window. I backed away fast. That's when I heard the sound. Not inside, from behind me. A low wheeze like someone breathing hard through their nose. I turned. The man was standing at the edge of the building, in the shadows where the light didn't reach. Same blank expression, Same silence. He didn't blink, didn't move, just watched me. Then he said, "You've got a leak." I blinked. "What?" "Gas line," he said. "I can fix it." I hadn't told him anything about the car. I hadn't even popped the hood. I told him I was fine and got in quickly, locking the doors. He didn't move, just stood there, watching. The pump was still off. I was debating whether to try a few more miles on fumes when I noticed something strange. My back window, the inside of the glass, was smudged. 3 long streaks, like greasy fingerprints trailing downward, as if someone had leaned against it from the inside. I hadn't noticed them when I left my brother's house, and I definitely had no passengers. That's when I realised I never heard the man's door open. He was just there, out of nowhere. No footsteps, no gravel crunch. I put the car in reverse and backed out fast. As I pulled away, I glanced in the mirror. He was still standing in the same spot, now smiling, wide, too wide. His teeth were small, perfectly even, almost fake looking, and he was holding something now, a set of keys, not his, mine. I didn't stop driving for over an hour. When I pulled into a real gas station, one with other cars and lights and music coming from the store, I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in. My pockets were empty, no keys, no $20 bill, even my wallet was missing. But the car had been running the whole time. I popped the trunk, stomach in knots, nothing inside, no sign of anyone, no forced entry. But on the inside of the trunk door, written in something dark and sticky, were 4 words: "Leave the car next." I reported it to the police, of course, gave them everything I could, location, description, even the gas station's name from the receipt I'd managed to keep. They said there was no such gas station on that stretch of road, no record of one operating there in over 15 years, and the receipt, it just said, "Item, 1 service, cash received, $20, thank you." No address, no business name, just a timestamp, 3:13 p.m. I had stopped around 7:30 p.m. To this day, I don't know where I went or who he was. All I know is I sold that car the next week, and sometimes, not often, but enough to matter, I still dream about that station. Only this time, I never get to drive away. I moved into the boarding house after my breakup. It was all I could afford. Not a motel, but not quite an apartment either. More like a crumbling halfway house with locked rooms and peeling wallpaper. Rent was week to week, cash only. The guy who ran the place, Brian, was friendly enough. A little twitcher, always looked like he hadn't slept. He gave me a room on the 2nd floor, room 4. Said it was quiet, good light, and just to ignore the end of the hall. That's what he said, just that. Ignore the end of the hall. I thought it was weird, but I was tired and broke and honestly didn't care. My room was small, no TV, no outlets that worked properly, and the walls were so thin I could hear the guy next door coughing in his sleep. But I didn't plan on staying long. The first few nights were uneventful, except for the sound. Every night around 3:15, I'd hear movement down the hallway. Not footsteps exactly, more like dragging. Then a faint tap, tap, tap. Always 3 times, always from the end of the hall. I asked Brian about it once, and he waved it off, said the plumbing was old. These pipes moan, he muttered, especially in that part of the house. I almost believed him too, until the night I saw the door. It was past midnight, and I was walking back from the shared bathroom, barefoot, half asleep. As I passed the far end of the hall, I noticed a sliver of light beneath the wall. I froze. It wasn't a wall, it was a door, just painted over, badly. The brush strokes were uneven, like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry. A doorknob was still faintly visible beneath the layers of paint, rusted over. I touched it. The metal felt cold, wet somehow. That's when I noticed the scratches down near the base, tiny grooves in the wood, like fingernails clawing to get out. I backed away, didn't tell anyone, just went back to my room and locked the door. That night, the tapping was louder. 3 sharp knocks, then a low sound, like something breathing, slow and thick, too big for a person. It stopped right outside my door. I held my breath for what felt like forever. Finally it moved on, back toward the end of the hall. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next day, I tried to ask one of the other tenants, a woman named Joy, who always wore a bathrobe and never looked anyone in the eye. I caught her in the kitchen, asked her straight up, "What's at the end of the hall?" She froze, didn't even blink for a few seconds. Then she said, "You've been here a week, right?" I nodded, and she said, "Then don't open the door, that's how long it takes." That night, the sound didn't come at 3:15, it came earlier. I was lying in bed, headphones on, trying to drown out the usual creaks and groans of the house, when my music cut out. Dead silence. Then the dragging sound, closer than before. I got up, thinking maybe someone was hurt, peered through the peephole. The hallway looked the same, dim yellow light, shadows trembling across the floor. Then something moved, just out of my line of sight, slow and lurching, like someone crawling. I didn't open the door, I waited, and waited. Eventually, the noise faded, but I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone anymore. The air in my room felt different, heavier, like someone had just left. The next morning, I checked the end of the hall again. The painted over door, it was cracked open, just a sliver, enough to see that it wasn't a closet or crawl space. There were stairs leading down. I packed a bag, tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. Neither would the Uber app, just spun and spun with no signal. Brian wasn't around either. When I knocked on his office door, nobody answered. I thought about just walking out, but I didn't even know where I was anymore. The GPS said I was in unknown sector. No joke, all caps. That night, I stayed awake with the lights on. The tapping started again, but this time it didn't stop. It moved past my door, back again, like something pacing. When I couldn't take it anymore, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The door at the end, it was wide open, and I swear I heard someone whisper my name. I should have gone back, should have locked myself in and waited for sunrise, but I didn't. I walked down the hallway, past all the rooms with closed doors, toward the open stairwell. The air changed with every step, colder, denser, like I was walking underwater. As I reached the doorway, I looked down. The stairs didn't lead into a basement, they just kept going, down and down into blackness, like an old mine shaft. No sounds, no movement, just that pressure, something deep and patient waiting below. I turned back toward the hallway, and the lights went out. When they flickered back on a second later, every door on the floor was open. Every room was empty, every bed untouched, no signs of life, except for the shadows standing in the doorways, dozens of them, motionless, each facing me. I ran, down the stairs, down into the dark, thinking maybe I could outrun it. I don't remember reaching the bottom, I don't even remember falling, but I woke up back in my room, alone, door bolted from the inside, no open doors, no shadows, no noise, just silence, and one thing scratched into the wall beside my bed. Room 4 opens next. About a year ago, I moved into a small rental house while saving up to buy my own place. It wasn't much, a row of old single-storey homes crammed together near the river, but it was affordable. Mostly retired folks lived there, quiet, safe, or so I thought. The house next to mine, number 5, had been empty when I moved in. Overgrown yard, shutters. I asked the landlord if anyone lived there, and he just shrugged and said, nobody for a long time. 2 weeks later, I noticed lights on inside. I figured someone must have finally rented it. Didn't think much of it at first, until I saw him. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was hauling groceries from my car when I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A man standing at the window of number 5. Just standing there, no curtain, no blinking, just staring out at nothing. I waved like an idiot. No reaction. He stayed there, frozen, until I finally went inside. Over the next few days, I saw him more. Sometimes in the yard, sometimes at the back window, staring into the woods. He never did anything. Didn't mow the lawn, didn't get the mail, didn't drive anywhere, just stood. Always wearing the same thing. A brown jacket, dark jeans, black boots. His hair was short and messy, like he'd cut it himself. There was something wrong with the way he stood too still. Like he didn't need to shift his weight or scratch an itch like normal people do. At first, I told myself he was probably just eccentric. Maybe a vet, maybe a loner. But then the small things started happening. The sounds at night, scraping against my siding, footsteps in the dry leaves outside my bedroom window at 3 a.m. I installed cameras around my house, cheap ones off Amazon, but they never caught anything. Sometimes they wouldn't even turn on. One night, around midnight, I woke up thirsty, went to the kitchen to get water. As I passed the front window, I glanced out without thinking. He was there, standing at the edge of my yard, half in the shadows, facing my house. I froze. My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't know what to do. Call the police, but what would I say? Some guy was standing. That wasn't illegal. I turned off all the lights, crouched down and waited. After a while, I peeked out again. He was gone. No footsteps, no car leaving. Just gone. The next morning, I found small muddy footprints by the window. Not shoes, bare feet, pressed right up against the wall of my house. I decided I was done. Started looking for a new place immediately. Only, every time I toured a rental, it fell through. One place said my references weren't good enough. Another jacked up the price last minute. It felt like I was meant to stay, like I was trapped there somehow. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. I started seeing him everywhere. Glimpses at the grocery store, reflections in car windows, even once inside my mirror. Not directly, just a quick flash, like he was behind me. But when I turned, nothing was there. I tried telling myself it was stress, until the night it all changed. I woke up to a loud bang at my front door, someone hammering against it with open palms. I grabbed a bat from under my bed and crept toward the living room. It was silent again by the time I got there. No more banging, no more sounds. I checked through the peephole, nobody. But when I opened the door, against my better judgment, there was a package sitting there, wrapped in brown paper. No address, no name. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. Inside was a photograph, an old Polaroid, yellowed at the edges. It showed me, sleeping in my bed, taken from inches away. I dropped it, ran to my bedroom, turned the place upside down looking for cameras. I called the police. They came, took a report, promised to patrol the area, but they couldn't find anything. No footprints, no forced entry. They said I probably imagined it. Stress, overwork. Maybe I had taken the photo myself and forgotten. I knew better. I started sleeping at friends' houses after that. Never stayed in my place after dark. I even stopped going home for mail. Eventually, I managed to sublet the place and moved across town. A new apartment, newer neighbours, everything different. But about a week after I settled in, I came home one evening to find a package sitting at my door. Brown paper, no name, no address. Inside, another photograph. This time, it wasn't a picture of me sleeping. It was a picture of my front door. has owned the same house in rural Maine since 1919. It's nothing grand, just a sagging 2-storey farmhouse on 6 acres of pine woods and rocky earth, but we've always kept it in the family. The story goes that my great-grandfather built it by hand after coming home from World War I, lived there until he died. My grandfather raised his kids there. My dad was born in the upstairs bedroom, and when he left at 18, he swore he'd never come back. I didn't understand until I turned 26. That's when I inherited the house. Not through a will, nothing formal like that. My Uncle David just called me out of nowhere one afternoon and said, "It's yours now. I'm not stepping foot in that place again." Then he hung up. No explanation. When I drove up to the property the first time, I had this strange feeling that the woods around it were leaning in, like they were waiting. It was late fall, brittle air, the kind that smells like frost and old bark. Inside, the house looked abandoned. Furniture under white sheets, fireplace full of ash, family photos still on the wall, covered in dust. But it wasn't just empty. It felt paused, like the house had stopped in mid-thought and was waiting for someone to finish it. The first few nights were uneventful, cold, a little creaky. I used the downstairs guest room to avoid heating the whole house. But every morning, I'd find the upstairs bedroom door open, always just a few inches. I tried locking it, still opened. I eventually wedged it shut with a chair. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of something heavy dragging across the upstairs floor. I froze in bed. Then, 2 knocks from inside of the wall, right behind the headboard. I moved to the couch after that. Didn't sleep well at all. The next day, I found the chair I'd wedged under the upstairs doorknob sitting at the bottom of the stairs, perfectly upright. I didn't touch it. Instead, I went outside and called my father, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Told him I was staying at the house. He was quiet for a long time and then said, "You weren't supposed to take that place." I asked him what he meant. He just said, "It's not supposed to skip." When I pushed him for more, he got angry, told me to leave, told me if I ever slept in the house long enough, I'd stop dreaming the way normal people do. I didn't understand until the dreams started. They weren't nightmares, not exactly. Just different. Real. I'd see people I didn't know, standing at the edge of the woods or watching from the upstairs window. Sometimes they were inside, sitting in chairs, facing away, silent. One woman came back again and again, mid-30s, pale dress, hair tied back too tightly. She never blinked, just looked at me while I slept. Eventually, I stopped feeling rested at all. The house didn't smell like dust anymore. It smelled wet, like earth, like the inside of a crawl space. And every morning, the upstairs floor was covered in footprints, like a child had run circles around the room all night, except I don't have kids, and there were no signs of animals. One night, I stayed up with a space heater, trying to keep warm, flipping through one of the old family photo albums that had been left on a shelf. The last few pages were stuck together. When I finally pried them apart, there was a newspaper clipping folded and pressed inside. Local boy dies in fall. Family declines burial. No date, no name. Just a blurry black and white photo of a boy on a rope swing. He looked like me when I was 10. When I called my father the next day, he answered on the first ring. I asked him who the boy was. He said, "That's why the house skipped me. That's why it went to you." I told him I didn't understand, and he said, "You don't have to. Just don't go upstairs anymore, and don't dream in the house. That's how it learned you." That was 2 years ago. I moved out 6 months later. Haven't been back since, but I still get calls from an old landline every few weeks. No number, just static when I pick up. Sometimes, in the background, I can hear a woman whispering. Other times, it's a child crying softly. One time, I swear I heard my own voice saying, "Come upstairs." I used to do contract repair work for small town properties that nobody else wanted to touch. Old motels, barns, abandoned homes. The kind of places you drive past without looking too long. One of the last jobs I took was in a town called Belridge. You won't find it on a map, not anymore. The job was simple. Fix the power in an old funeral home that had been closed for over a decade. The owner was a man named Merrin. He looked about 90 and sounded like he smoked every day of those years. He told me the building was still his, even though he didn't run the business anymore. Said he wanted it lit up one last time. Didn't say why. Didn't need it for a service. No new burials. No family coming through. Just wanted the lights to work. I arrived on a grey Wednesday, just before dusk. The place was exactly what you'd expect. Chipped stone steps, shutters hanging loose, and that smell of thick, stale air that only comes from sealed rooms and old grief. The chapel doors were locked when I got there, but Ellie had left a key in a cracked flower pot. It fit, but just barely, like the wood had warped. Inside was worse than I imagined. Dust over everything, like snowfall. Every chair covered in plastic. The reception area still had a guest book open from 2009. The last name written was Marjorie Lynn, beautiful service. There were no others, no signs anyone had been through since. The power panel was in the basement, of course. I found the stairs behind a locked office door. They creaked like bones. As I made my way down, I started feeling watched. It wasn't a presence exactly, more like a weight behind me. The basement was cooler than it should have been. No airflow and the lights were out, so I used my flashlight. The power box was ancient, corroded, patched together like a Frankenstein mess of copper and cloth wiring, but it worked. After about 20 minutes of careful cleaning and rewiring, I flipped the main breaker. The lights came on with a low hum. Not just in the basement, all of them. Upstairs, I heard the fluorescents buzz to life, and something else. Music, pipe organ music, coming from the chapel. I froze, listening. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't coming from speakers. It sounded live, like someone pressing the keys just softly enough to be unsettling. I went back up. The chapel doors were open now. I was sure I closed them. Inside, the pews were all still wrapped in plastic. The air shimmered slightly from the heat of the bulbs, and the organ was playing, but no one was seated at it. The keys moved on their own, slow, careful, like someone was warming up. I didn't say anything, didn't move. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence. Not even the hum of the electricity anymore. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. There was a viewing casket at the front of the chapel, closed. I hadn't seen it when I entered. It hadn't been there. There was no nameplate, no flowers, just a simple pine box with iron fixtures sitting on a raised platform. It looked freshly placed. The dust hadn't settled on it yet. I stood at the back of the room, staring. Then, without meaning to, I took a few steps forward, closer and closer. It was like my feet weren't entirely mine. I got maybe 10 feet before something in my gut screamed, "Stop." I turned and left, quick but not panicked, locked the door behind me. Outside, the sky had turned orange-pink, and I noticed something else strange. My truck wasn't where I'd parked it. It was a few feet off to the side, like someone had rolled it out of the driveway, and there were footprints in the gravel leading back into the funeral home. I got in and drove straight back to the motel. Called Ellie that night, told him the power was fixed but something was off. He just chuckled, said, "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't know how to answer. He went quiet for a moment, then said something that still sits heavy with me. She doesn't like being forgotten, that's all. She just wanted one more night. I asked him what he meant, and he hung up. I never billed him, never even went back to collect my tools. A week later, I tried looking up the funeral home again. Belridge wasn't listed anywhere. Google Maps just showed a blank spot, like the town had been wiped clean. A few months passed. Then, last winter, I got a plain envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of me, standing in the chapel, in front of the casket, looking down at it. Except, I never opened it. But in the photo, the lid was wide open, and my face is white, staring at something inside. And behind me, in the corner of the photo, someone is sitting at the organ, face turned toward the lens, smiling. Well, that concludes today's Scary Reddit stories. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this creepy journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please also leave your own spooky experiences below in the comments. Who knows, I could add it to the next video, which would be amazing. Until next time, take care.